Welcome back to your regularly scheduled Kirblog, your regularly scheduled not spooky or Halloween or October related Kirblog. This question comes all the way from Mobius, from Patrick the Hedgehog. Hey Kirb, I don't know if you've covered this, but I was wondering if you could give your thoughts on the whole sub versus dub debate that's been going on for the longest time. Yes, it has. So I've been doing a lot of these anime related ones. I mean, in the midst of those. The Halloween ones this past month, I did a Death Note episode and I did a Yu-Gi-Oh episode. And judging by the numbers, you guys tend to like those. So I figured, since on the day that this is going to be coming out, actually later tonight on Saturday, November 1st, I believe, is the last episode of Bleach airing on Adult Swim of the anime series. I know, whatever. And then following that, next weekend is going to be the premiere of Dragon Ball Z Kai on Adult Swim. So I have a lot of anime shit to talk about, and figured, why not tackle this subject? Because it is a pretty consistent thing, and I guess I've never necessarily told my whole opinion on it. So once again, brief history. My gateway anime were Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z. As were with many people in my age range. I had seen also around the same time. I had seen Sailor Moon. I'd seen a show on Nick Jr. called The Little Bits, which was Riribito or something in Japanese. I think Crunchyroll is streaming the sub version of that or something recently. Whatever. So I'm trying to remember exactly what the first show was that I think it actually might have been Pokemon. Yeah, you know what? It was Pokemon because I remember hearing about the episodes that were cut from our version, and obviously the Porygon one, and that caused the seizures, and then a few of the others that were cut, and then a couple of them that were later just recirculated, and they just did them anyway. So that was the first time I think I'd really learned that these are shows from Japan, and then I think the first show I'd ever watched in Japanese, or any anime I'd ever seen in Japanese before, might have told the story before, but. Basically, for my birthday one year, I said to a friend of mine who had a lot of subbed VHSs that he would get from this store called Collector's Kingdom, I wanted to see the very end of Dragon Ball Everything. And the Boo saga in DBZ in America hadn't even finished airing, but I wanted to see the end of everything, which meant the last episode of GT. So he brought in a videotape, and we watched the last 2 or 3 episodes of Dragon Ball GT. I had no idea what the hell was going on, but didn't care. I was like, oh my god, new Dragon Ball stuff, and oh crap, it's cool. And it's cool because it's in the original language and stuff. And, it's interesting because I had two kind of stark contrast things going on within those first two experiences. First of all, learning about, the American version didn't air a bunch of these awesome, cool, original Japanese episodes, like the one with Porygon and blah, 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 and this one where James has fake boobs from Team Rocket, and this one where Ash has a gun pointed at his face. That's dumb. Censorship is bad. I want to see the original, blah, blah, blah. That started, and then Dragon Ball Z, or I guess GT, but Dragon Ball everything. The other stark contrast was I heard Goku's Japanese voice for the first time, which was a woman coming out of Super Saiyan 4 Goku, who was a fully grown adult, and I'm like, I know actually it wasn't weird to me. I wasn't even phased. I was just like, oh, okay, well he's a kid in this version, and he's probably played by a woman because he's a little kid. And therefore, when, it's the same voice. Okay, whatever. I just wasn't even fazed by it. It didn't even occur to me or whatever. So it was weird. I had a few of those things kind of planted in my head about as far as the differences between what I had seen in English by that point, compared to now. I want to say that One Piece, I could be wrong about this, but I think that One Piece was one of the first big shows that I downloaded a lot of. Yu-Gi-Oh! I mentioned on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Episode with Martin that I had bought a lot of bootleg box sets, which I'm not proud of. I'm sure they're lost to the ether somewhere, but those are very horribly subtitled also. One Piece, I downloaded that show a lot, and I've bought all the episodes that I downloaded, so I have made up for my awful past mistakes, because I don't, if it's not obvious, I don't support piracy with the anime industry, which we'll get to that, but yeah, so One Piece was the first big show that I followed, consistently subtitled, I would say. And I mean, obviously, around that time, 4Kids had the license to One Piece, and they were, airing their edited version of the show on Saturday morning. And, oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I just remembered. Mega Man NT Warrior, or rather Rockman.EXE, was another series that I collected bootleg DVD box sets of. That was before, I think that was between Yu-Gi-Oh! And before One Piece, I believe. And that was when I was also becoming aware of fan subs. So, I had a lot of that going on, and but here's the thing. Also around that same time was when I started going to conventions, and I was meeting a lot of people in the anime industry, and people who I was seeing, okay, they really care about their job, and they really care about staying true to this. And in fact, I remember in particular, I think, actually just before the very first convention I went to, at Otakon 2005, I was finishing up Yu Yu Hakusho on DVD, which I had been watching in English the whole time, and was loving the dub because I knew it was uncut. And I was listening to Justin Cook on the one of the commentaries for the last few episodes that were on that last DVD, talking about just kind of the whole process of the show. And I was beginning to just kind of learn more about the industry. I knew who a lot of voice actors were, but I didn't really know exactly how the anime production process worked. So Justin and a lot of the other folks from Funimation in particular that spoke on those commentaries, and who I would later go on to meet at conventions, they were talking about how it worked. And Justin, being the director and producer and the voice of the main character in the show, for Yu Yu Hakusho in particular, he just talked about how much he loved the series, and he watched it all the way through, like twice just before working on the series, and just everything that they tried to do within the constraints that they had, because this was also back when the producer for Funimation was the guy, Barry Watson, who he was the person that was kind of with the mentality of, we got to make this for kids, we gotta make this, so Americans will get it. And Justin was kind of the young upstart who, of course now he is the head producer of Funimation, but he was the one who was like, why don't we just try to do this the way it's supposed to be? And I'm going to come back to that when I inevitably do a Dragon Ball Kai Kirblog, probably in a week from now, as a matter of fact. But yeah, I it's interesting. So I have grown to have a really big appreciation for people who work on dubbed anime, because it's certainly not the most difficult type of voiceover. I think that it kind of gets, people make it out to be more difficult than it is as far as doing it. But I do also understand that in general, just producing anime is not easy. It's inherently cheap, not by choice, but by just inherently by design. It's cheap because it's post-production, it's ADR, it's dubbing. You're automatically not going to have a high budget for that. Which is why I think it's impressive that so many companies now have set a particular standard for just the overall quality of it. Adaptation has gotten to be far better. There's much better writers, people like Patrick Seitz, J. Michael Tatum, who know what they're doing, who have true appreciation of the source material. And then you have folks who know how to write funny stuff for anime, which is also very difficult. There's exceptions, Shin-Chan was just completely overhauled because the Japanese asked them to. Sergeant Frog was kind of middle of the road, where the story and the characters were kept as they were supposed to be, but the jokes were original in order to just, it's meant to be funny. So if we're going to make it funny, we will have to make it funny for Americans, but that doesn't mean we have to butcher the entire story. That's where I think that the line is different. I think there are two major things that I think kind of get in the way between that and that. Is I think that adaptation and voiceover quality need to meet a particular standard today, and for the most part, every major company that does this, they uphold that standard. There's Toronto, which they do Beyblade and Bakugan, and they still, after over to 20 years, they don't fucking know how to do anime. Sorry guys, I know it's fond memories of the old Sailor Moon dub, but objectively that stuff isn't very good, and the stuff that they're doing now is not very good either. It's just objectively, that's how it is. But hey, I mean, no offense to my Canadian listeners, because the folks in Vancouver are some of the best people that do anime, and even Calgary is pretty good with Blue Water. But yeah, so I think that there is a standard that is met now by the majority of companies, and I think that people honestly who do think that like, oh, dubs are like, ruining it, because there's a difference also between like, I prefer the Japanese version, which is like, okay, that's fine, to oh, dubs are ruining this show and blah blah blah. And coupled with that too, I've seen so many cases where it's like, oh no, now the show's gonna come to America and it's gonna get dubbed and then everybody's gonna watch it. And when I see that, I'm just like, fuck you. It's like, oh man, how dare like a bunch of other people share in enjoying the same thing as you? You can't be a hipster about it because you illegally downloaded it like way ahead of time or whatever. Which now that is not as much of a problem because there's simulcasts and Crunchyroll and Funimation and a lot of places like that, and Neon Alley, they circumvent a lot of that shit. But yeah, so I don't know. I feel like we've reached kind of a better point with it. There are shows that I have appreciation for in both languages. I will still watch new subbed episodes of One Piece every weekend, and I follow along with the dub. For me, personally, I like it when it's a show that I'm really invested into. Because very rarely do I watch shows in Japanese first. Usually I'll like Attack on Titan. I waited until the dub came out. That's one of many examples. But I usually wait, and if I don't, then I'm usually excited to see what it is that they do with it in English. Because because of the fact that there just is that standard that is met by every company now, I'm usually never in that mindset of like, oh no, this show's gonna get ruined. Oh my god, because it just rarely happens anymore. Like back in the day, it's like, oh, sure, like, oh man, how are they gonna fuck up this Yu-Gi-Oh episode or whatever, or like, even if it was a show that was being released uncut and it's like it had to be censored for broadcast, it's like whatever. It's just because it's on TV and standards and practices, and there's nothing we can fucking do about that, whatever. But I get excited. I mean, like, example, One Piece, I have friends who are in that show now. People I've worked with on Tome who are voicing like major important characters. It's a show that I've been following for a really, like, almost a decade now, I think. Long time. And, and I mean, I was excited when it got picked up by Funimation in 2007. And then it's like, hey, we're going to do this the right way, and we're going to do it the way that it deserved to be treated. And, Dragon Ball Kai, it's like as much as I loved DBZ growing up, and I learned more about how it was supposed to be, I grew an appreciation for its original Japanese version. And I'm like, objectively, this dub is not very faithful. It's not incredibly well acted in most parts. And honestly, even the people that worked on it would agree with that. And Dragon Ball Z Kai was kind of their opportunity to like, hey, what if we did this not watered down for 10-year-olds? And all of us have a decade's worth of experience under our belt as actors and directors and engineers and everything, So it just objectively, it's like, this is a better, representation of the original source material. And I mean, also there's cases where it's like we're changing the music or we're doing this. It's like I find that is unnecessary. But again, those are just very rare exceptions, and it's like even when that happens, it's like whatever, it's not hurting anybody. And I will say too, because I've been ragging on 4Kids a lot, I'm not really intended to, because even with them, it's like I get it, I understand. They found their success. They had a particular model to go off of, and they were going to repeat it because that's what was giving them success multiple times over. They didn't expect Pokemon to take off as massively as it did, and Yu-Gi-Oh was like the unexpected lightning bolt that struck twice. But you know what? On that same note, people wouldn't know what anime was were it not for them. As much as we bitch and complain about like, oh, this and that, about they changed this show and whatever. The one thing I'll like really blame them for is the fact that I think that when they held on to the rights of shows and they wouldn't release a subtitled, uncut release of it anywhere in any way, shape, or form, that sucked, because it's like that's basically telling you pirate this in Japanese because you can't get it any other way in America, period, unless you watch it on our channel or if we ever feel like producing a DVD of it, then you can buy the censored-only version of it. Like, that I don't agree with. But that's ancient history, and the ancient history that's worth respecting is, without the success that they got with Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, and then likewise without the success of the old kind of, whatever censored version of DBZ that Funimation did, and I guess to an extent Sailor Moon, because Sailor Moon did pretty well, I think, at the time as well. We wouldn't have conventions. We wouldn't have a lot more anime on TV. We probably wouldn't have uncut shows on Adult Swim. We wouldn't have the stuff that we have, So I think it's understandable. I acknowledge it's like, whatever, it was the past. It was the way it was. It's how the medium evolved over here, and it's. As someone also, obviously, who I didn't even think to mention this, as someone who has also gotten to do stuff for the English American anime industry, I also have seen firsthand like what it's like and what the process is and how much they care and how much they're trying, and I think that that's worth appreciating. I don't think it's worth hating. I don't think it's harming anything. It hasn't been harming anything for a very long time. The only cases where it's really that, over the line, in the eyes of really hardcore fans, is when it's for a show that's for little kids, and it's like, it's more about selling the toys, and it's like, all right, but if we have to change the names and the music and whatever and blah 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 and censor this and that to get it on Saturday morning so the kids will watch it and go buy the cards or the action figures or whatever at Toys R Us that day, then that's the way it is. It's the equilibrium, I guess, that is created for how that stuff survives in our country. So, you don't have to like it, but it's just accepting it and understanding it, I think, is worth it. So I guess that's kind of all I have to say. I'm going to be talking more about, again, I have some anime stuff to talk about, because the next Kirblog will be about the end of Bleach. And then, what is it? And then next weekend will be my Kirblog about Dragon Ball Z Kai. So look forward to those two. But in the meantime, tell me your thoughts. Do you feel a sense of openness now to both if you're a hardcore dub fan of certain things and you don't like the Japanese versions of stuff, have you grown to appreciate the source material more? Vice versa, if you're a hardcore sub fan, have you learned that dubs have gotten better and they're worth also appreciating as well because they're not harming the industry at all? Let me know. Tell me in particular in the comments below if you feel like you've learned. If you feel not from this in particular, not from the Kirblog, but I mean like just in general, like over the years, has your opinion changed of either dubs or subs? Have you? Because I feel like it doesn't need to be a versus thing, despite that being the topic of this. It doesn't need to be a versus thing. I think that you can just live with both. I think it's perfectly fine to just do that. So tell me about your experiences, and I would say you could suggest Kirblog topics, but I have a bunch for the rest of the month kind of plotted out, so you'll just have to bear with me. Hope you enjoyed. Keep on listening, and I will see you next time.